Hi, Joe. It's a great pleasure being here to interview you. First of all, I would love to congratulate you for this new album coming up soon. I think this is a very different album from all your previous work, and I would like to know if this was something that you were looking for.
I really did want to create a new standard for myself. I wanted my writing and arranging and my playing to be much better than I had ever achieved on any other album. And I wanted the whole album to have a sound that was very unique to itself, that would kind of, be groundbreaking for guitar albums in general, in trying to make them more enjoyable to listen to, and to get away from just pure demonstration of technique. And that's mainly because I've made so many albums, and my fans are kind of used to my playing, so I didn't see the need to focus on that, as if I was 20 years old and trying to start out and make a name for myself. So this allowed me to really focus on what's really hard, which is to make a really wonderful group of songs and to perform and produce them in the highest quality way.
I think you achieved that, and a big part of this probably has to do with all the sounds and keyboards and all the arrangements, not only from the guitar parts. And I can hear like there's a great production and beautiful arrangements through the whole album.
Thank you. Yeah, the players on the album are amazing. I mean, just the feel and the sound of Kenny Aronoff on the drums, joined together with Brian Beller on the bass. That is just a magical rhythm section. They just make everything sound natural, but at the same time very vital and experimental, but very easy and easy to listen to. I guess that's what I'm saying. It's like, physically it feels very natural, even if they're doing odd time signatures and performing things that are very difficult. Of course, I have three keyboard players on the album. Eric and I are pretty much doing lots of chords and some rhythm work, but all the crazy, beautiful solo work on the keyboards is the incredible Ray Thistlethwaite from the band Thirsty Merc. He's from Australia, and he is just a superstar when it comes to just being an all-around musician. He's a fantastic vocalist, guitar player, and he really shines on the keyboards.
When you compose the parts that are not guitar parts, do you usually do your own demos with the sounds you're looking for? Or you just tell Eric and Ray what kind of sound are you looking for and give them freedom to do?
Yeah. Sometimes, it turns out that the idea that we wind up sending out first is really just a catalyst to see if we can stimulate each other's creative juices to take it somewhere else. And you never really know where it's going to go. Like with the title track, Ray wound up doing kind of like a John Lord Deep Purple organ performance throughout the whole song. And he found a way to work in kind of organ solo bits in and around the guitar. And the song obviously has so much guitar in it that it was less keyboard oriented, like less places for him to take a straight out solo. But from conversations that we had, last year, just about classic rock stuff that we really loved, it turned out that, when he was young, his parents would play a lot of that stuff for him. So he wound up, listening to the kind of music that I grew up listening to, and it allowed him to kind of tap into some of my early influences. And this really is a cool way because, he's much younger than I am, and he comes to the band with different influences. And I wanted to make sure that he felt natural to go back and forth between, what comes natural to him and echoing things that, let's say, Kenny and I grew up listening to. And so it's a really interesting dynamic in this band, and I'm excited that at some point we're going to be able to get on stage and display all this in front of people and have a great set of live shows.
Oh, that reminds me of a recent interview that I saw with Eddie Van Halen, that he was talking that when they were doing their first albums, each member of the band was listening to a very different kind of music than the other. And he said that that was great because if they had been listening to the same music, probably this would have resulted in a very boring creation process for themselves.
Yeah, it's really something, and it is a definite energy in every band, which is really kind of like what made Chickenfoot so much fun. Was that when we got together, we decided that we wouldn't play, we wouldn't play like Chili Pepper stuff. We wouldn't play my instrumental stuff or Van Halen music. We would just play music that came from our shared influences and influences that maybe were unique to one particular player. And that was the energy that created the Chickenfoot sound and was the reason why we wrote the kind of music that we did. So every band really relies on that, their backgrounds and how they come to terms with that as a group, as a unit.
Oh, talking about Chickenfoot, Sammy, Michael, and Chad, they seem like great, funny, and crazy guys. How cool is it hanging with those guys and sharing stage and composing with them?
Yeah. Oh, always fun, always a party, and a really great, challenging musical moments, on stage where you really got to dig deep and play your best every night.
Coming back to your album, you just mentioned that there are some odd time signatures, and the song Tension and Release starts with a guitar riff in 7/4. And listening to it, I started asking myself, when you compose these difficult parts, they just come to you by inspiration, or you just think, oh, I'm going to write something in 7/4?
Oh, yeah. It just came naturally to me. I was pulling a 7-string guitar out of a case, and I hadn't played the guitar in years. And the strings were really that old. I think it went back like 3 albums was the last time we pulled that guitar out. And so the strings were really wobbly. So I plugged it in, I started playing. I immediately started that riff. I wasn't even thinking that it was in 7/4. But once I recorded it, I thought, oh, that's in 7/4. And then I thought, I wonder what it sounds like in 4/4. And then I thought, well, I know, I'll arrange the song so I get to play the riff in 7/4 and 4/4. So that was really a trip, because when I laid out the demo for everybody, that was the first thing they said is, oh, that's so weird. You do it first in 4, and then the second, when the song ends, it's the same riff except it's in 7. And I always like when you use odd times and you make them sound as natural as 4/4. To me, that's really key. The rest of it is really just like math, and any student of music can take out a piece of paper and write stuff down in odd time signatures and find people to play it. But it the effect is always the same. It draws attention to itself because it's an odd time, and that can be really good if that's the feeling you want to give people, is to make them think in terms of the timing. But if you're trying to tell them another story and you want the odd time signature to take a backseat, like not be the feature of the music, well, then you've got to create music in that signature that's natural and supersedes any kind of odd time signature. So I find that really fascinating, because I think we do naturally have rhythms in our body that are odd, not in even time signatures, but we don't necessarily think about it in an intellectual sense. So I always want to try to tap into that. It's almost like sports in a way, because a lot of really fantastic athletes, they're not really thinking like that. You know what I mean? That every body out there, every human body is unique, and every generation reaches some new fantastic heights in athletic prowess, and it's because of these athletes are able to tap into their uniqueness. They're not following a formula, so I don't like following formulas in music either.
I felt this album is so emotional, especially songs like Faceless or the last song, Desolation. Every time I heard the album and after finishing with this last song, I would feel like about crying, very intense emotions. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, certainly, Desolation is about loss, is about when somebody dies. And I think that when I tapped into that emotion, I was thinking that there's two things that's going on for any of us who've ever, sat at someone's deathbed. There's two perspectives, right? There's the person that's leaving, and they may have, good feelings and bad feelings and fears and concerns running through their mind. And then the person that is there comforting them, that's being left behind, also has the same set of emotions running through them. And they're both, both people are also flooded with memories, trying to make sense of this huge chapter in their lives ending. And this is kind of like what I was tapping into from my own personal experience. But the writing of it was quite unusual, and I'll try to make it short, but it was a very long process. I had written a song that was very short. It was really just a melodic piece, a one-piece song that I had sent to my producer Eric Kodia to listen to, and he. The first time that he worked on it, he decided to turn it into about 22-minute piece of music. And he expanded the part that I had given him and put it in the middle, made it the second part. And then he wrote a very long crescendo leading into the song. It must have been about 8 minutes of orchestration just before getting to the main part of the song. And then at the end of the song, he added this orchestral improvisation. And in my time working on it, I finally realized that the first part didn't make any sense. And the part that I had written as a full song, I didn't really think it fit on the album anymore. But what I really loved was the emotional quality of the third part, which was just an orchestra. It had no band on it or anything. And we discussed that, and we said, okay, let's just get rid of part one and part two. And what can I do to bring out the true meaning of the last part? And I felt that I didn't want to rearrange it so that it would have a verse and a chorus and a bridge. That I liked the fact that it was very free and non-repetitive. But then, of course, that put a lot of pressure on whoever was going to add some kind of melodic content. I also didn't want to solo on it. I didn't want to bring attention to myself as a technical guitar player. I didn't want to show off. I didn't want to use any strange tricks or unusual sound effects. I thought this really requires pure emotion. And the way that I did it was I didn't really practice it or prepare anything. I would just come in every day and try to play over it for a few minutes. And if it didn't feel right, I would turn it off and do something else. And I did that for quite a while until one day came and all those emotions and memories that I told you about earlier, really took hold of me. And I just immersed myself in that, desperation, that sadness, that the memories of desolation. And because I was recording alone, I wasn't shy, to be that vulnerable in a recording session. Normally there's lots of people in the room, and you'd guard your emotions. But because I was all by myself, I relaxed and I said, I'm just going to let my true self come out. And that was just one take. And that one take, that one afternoon, and it just suddenly worked. And I thought I should just leave that alone. And every time that we listened to it, we realized how heavy it was. And then of course we realized that it could only occupy one space on the album because it's so sad that it would have to be at the end.
You know, my first thought after listening to it was, wow, now I would love to hear like a whole Satriani's orchestral album. Would you think about doing something like that?
I would. I think that would be a lot of fun, and it would be a lot of work, however.
I know, but this would be great.
Yeah, I think at some point, if it could ever be worked out, I think that would be great. Orchestral players have this fantastic experience and an enormous amount of training and discipline of playing together. Rock guitar players, of course, we are loners, rebels. We're really rough in comparison. So, when you step in front of an orchestra, suddenly you feel self-conscious and you don't know how you're really going to just, do what you do comfortably. So perhaps this, maybe there's an intermediate way, like what we've been doing here, where, we're dealing with a combination of real orchestra and synthesized orchestra, and the element of time is removed so that a rock musician like myself can have time to reflect and apply themselves in a manner over time, rather than being forced to just perform live with everybody else.
You are one of the greatest players ever, and I think most people know you from all your technical and virtuoso guitar playing. But for me, it's much more important being able to play like beautiful melodies and the interpretation you put in the melodies. And I think you're such a great performer of melodies, apart from all your technical stuff.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
So I guess my question would be, do you think that most of the people spend too much time practicing to get speed and technique, but not enough time on how to make a good interpretation of a melody?
Well, it takes all kinds. I am so impressed with young musicians who are playing guitar better than the electric guitar has ever been played before in the history of the world. I mean, there are people out there, Stephen Toronto, Jason Richardson. It's phenomenal what they're able to do on the guitar, and it's totally groundbreaking, and it inspires me. I know I'll never get there, but I follow it anyway, just because it's so much fun, because I like the guitar, and I love to see people push forward. There are no rules really in music. So, you need musicians who can play the fastest, most complicated stuff, and you need musicians who can also play the slowest, most beautiful stuff. That doesn't mean that those two qualities have to inhabit the same human. I mean, when you go to an eye doctor, you're not really expecting him to know how to deal with your foot,
Well, you have both.
The same thing when you go to a Japanese restaurant, you're not looking for pizza. You know what I mean?
I know.
And so I think specialization can be a great thing. And so if it's almost like if you're watching a film and there's a really crazy scene and you hear the craziest, fastest guitar playing ever, it fits. Of course, it may not fit if there's a tender love scene. So you need something else. But to expect one musician to have it all is kind of, it's not necessary. I guess that's what I'm saying. I love the fact that there's such a difference between guitar players out there. And, I wouldn't want to change anything about the guitar players that I grew up listening to, like Jimi Hendrix or Jimmy Page. I mean, to me, they're perfect. And I wouldn't want them to try to sound like some younger modern player. And at the same time, there's no reason for new young musicians to bother with the stuff from the old. They can learn from it, but it's a new year. We're in the future now. So they should just be, they should embody all that they like. You know what I mean?
Do you usually listen more modern music or older stuff?
Most of the time I'm so busy preparing for touring and recording that I'm listening to a lot of my own stuff just because it's important. And then I do a lot of free form practicing, preparing for the same two things, live performance and recording, which because so much recording is capturing a live moment, you know. So, but when I'm just sort of like hanging out, like when I'm in the other room and I'm painting, I'll put on, you know, live Led Zeppelin or something like that. I can listen to Led Zeppelin forever, you know, all day long. And it's, you know, partly it's because it's what I grew up listening to. So there's a great feeling of memory that I have when I'm listening to it. But I just, I'm impressed with, for one thing, the ability of that band and Jimmy Page to improvise so courageously night after night. I mean, you can listen to every live version of Since I've Been Loving You, and it's completely different. And the band just takes the most risks every night they play it. They just try something totally different. And it's so interesting.
They are such a great band.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of music out there today where that is applauded. You know, that was another era when audiences wanted to see a band stretch out. Today, it seems like people really want a unified audio-visual performance. They rate the band by how close they sound to the band's video and albums. You know, the album tracks. It is so, you know, the bands are more pressured to get more technical about how they perform live. Not in all forms of music. I mean, there's still, if you're in a blues band, it's, you know, the audience expects you to stretch out and whatnot. But yeah, most of the other bands, they have so many tracks that are being provided digitally by Pro Tools that they have to stick to the schedule, especially if there's dancers and, you know, explosions and whatever circus. It's very tightly, no improvising allowed.
I can imagine that you have recorded this CD with all the musicians recording all their parts in their own home studios because of this COVID global situation. But on your other albums, do you usually prefer to record everything playing live together or just like this?
Well, you know, there's a difference. Like the previous two albums I did, Shape-Shifting, What Happens Next, they were live, but in a studio. So, you know, we'd go into a studio, we'd be, you know, in one room and we tried to capture as much live performance as possible and then add tracks to that, you know, to fill out the song. But, you know, there's a pressure there because there's a clock on the wall and there's a, you know, date on the calendar and you're paying for the room and the engineers and the assistants, the food, the musicians, the parking. You're just like paying for everything. And so you don't go right to the edge of the cliff and take chances because you would spend too much money. So what everybody does is they go, I might be able to play this, but I better just pull it back a little bit and make sure that I can not make a mistake. And because we got to get this song done and move on to the next one, you know? And to me, after recording 18 albums, I thought, well, this is a thing that really permeates every album, and it's unnecessary with today's technology. So, you know, here I am, along with my other bandmates, we're all recording remotely in our private studios. And I said, you know, there's no reason for us to rush. So you can, you know, walk into your studio and wherever it might be, in the closet, the living room, or if you have a real studio, and record yourself doing, you know, off the cuff improvised takes. And if you don't like what you hear, wait a day and do it again. And don't send me anything until you think you've recorded yourself doing the best live performance. And that really helped because suddenly everybody relaxed, you know, Ray in Australia, Brian in Aguadulce, and the rest of the guys in LA, you know, and me up here in San Francisco. Suddenly we realized, wow, just because we're at home and we can overdub doesn't mean we have to, you know. So we realized that was just a mental construct that we had to get over, that even though you're recording digitally, you can still record live performance and leave it alone. and send it off, to your recording partners to see how they react to it. And ultimately, that's what contributed to the quality of the album, was these really inspired performances, all brought together magically by producer Eric Kodia and our mix engineer Greg Collar, who just really made everything sound fantastic.
When you record your guitar solos, do you usually try to record them straight in one take, or you do some overdubs if you get a good take with a small mistake?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We used to do that with tape all the time, punching in. That's what we used to call it. And there's, the most important thing is to capture something that's a one-time event, that is the artist at a really unexpected high point, and to erase it and replace it with something less exciting, but more professional, is really a horrible sin. Because when you go back and you listen to music that you really love when you were very young, the first time that you started to really fall in love with music, if you go back now as an adult and you listen to it, you go, oh, that's a little ahead of the beat, maybe that's behind, and that's a little too loud, and that guy's slightly out of tune when he hits that string, but of course, when we were being less critical and more natural, we just received the music as emotional information, one human being to another, sending out these musical feelings. That's actually the most important message from the music, not the technical ability of the players. That's just the tools they use to get the music out to you. You see what I mean? So if you're sitting down, you're recording at home, and you just play the greatest solo, and you get to the last note and it's just one fret off, you'd be crazy to erase it, So you go in and you replay that one note. And it's because eventually, what are you doing? You want to create a recording that will become the soundtrack to people's lives, that will help them celebrate and commiserate and do whatever. And so it's really not about you, although the career is about you, but actually, once you release the song, it's not yours anymore. It belongs in the hearts and souls of your fans.
And when you prepare for your live performances, how do you decide whether you will play the same exact guitar solo that you recorded on the album, or you may improvise it live?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point from the aspect of an instrumental guitarist. You can imagine an instrumental guitarist goes out on stage for a 2-hour show, and if they take every solo as an opportunity to show off, then they're basically making every song sound the same. So it's a real danger that you have to go in and you have to go, people have been hearing this exact solo every time that they play this song. It comes up on their playlist or something. So I should play that solo. Now I can alter it a tiny bit, and I can perhaps learn how to play it better, because now I've had more experience with it, but I shouldn't change it. So that, like, when that first solo hits in the song Surfing with the Alien, you've got to do that trill all the way up there on the C sharp. If you don't, you're kind of letting everybody down, because that's what they expect to hear. Now, I think the opposite would be when you're in a vocal band, because when you're in a vocal band, really they're paying attention to the singer and the words. That's what the song is really about. And the guitar solo is really an extra element of the arrangement. It's not an expression of the meaning of the song like it is in an instrumental piece of music. So there's a real big difference in how those solos function. So that's why I try to get as close as I can to the original album's solo for each song. But then I find places where I can improvise. And I also, as I said before, I find places where I can play it better than I did on the album, because I've had more experience with it.
Well, Joe, thanks so much for this interview. It was a great pleasure talking to you. I wish you all the best with your CD, and hopefully you can come on tour soon here to Europe and Spain, and we can see you performing on stage. So I wish you all the best, and hopefully see you soon. Take care.
That would be really great. Yeah. Thank you so much for
Thanks so
talking
much.
about the album with me. All right.
Bye.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.